Good morning, everyone. Sorry about that. Welcome. Happy New Year. Welcome to our first cozy Parks and Environment meeting for 2018. So welcome to meeting 24 of the Parks and Environment Committee. Welcome to members of the committee and to visiting members. We have the Tree King, Councillor Deputy Mayor, friend of trees, to Bear Maker, and Councillor Troisi. Welcome to our committee. That's fantastic. And welcome to other members of the public and city staff, of course. For those in this room with us, the screen at the back of the room provides real-time updates, concerns, where we are on the agenda and what's coming up next. You can follow the agenda and debate on your computer, your tablet, or smartphone at www.toronto.ca/council. And we'd like to acknowledge the Parks and Environment Committee gratefully acknowledges it is meeting on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and home to many diverse Indigenous peoples. So let's. So first, we are we're looking for confirmation of the minutes from November. That's when we last saw each other. Councillor Doucette. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. And any declaration, oh, sorry, that was supposed to be first. Declaration of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Seeing none, we will go forward. And so let's go through the agenda. PE 24.1, the impact of enforcement actions and revisions to the tree bylaws. All things trees. Does anyone want to hold that or speak to that? I'm just looking for it. Okay, Councillor Layton's holding that. PE 24.2, tree protection through the Committee of Adjustment process. Sure, we'll hold that. Hold that in my name. PE 24.4, the Parks Ambassador service levels. We're just checking this right now because it's a live file before budget, so we're trying to figure out if we're allowed to discuss it. So we'll just hold that for now until there's Sarah's name till we sort that out. PE 24.4, evaluation of biodiesel for city fleet operations. I'm going to hold that. Oh, actually we have a DEP on that. Deputation. All right. PE 24.5, reinforcing the importance of the Toronto Island habitat. And we have 3 deputations on that. All right. So let's start with number 1, PE 24.1, impact of enforcement actions and the revision to the tree bylaws. And that was held.
Yes.
So we don't have any deputations. Does anyone here want to speak to that? Trees, glorious trees. Okay. All right. So seeing none, and welcome, Councillor Wong Tam. Good morning. Happy New Year. So we have questions of staff, and we have Mr. Layton, Councillor Layton.
Thank you very much. On page 4 of the report, the third paragraph down, talks about the only 50% of the allegations being investigated in 2016, right? So that's where only following up with half the calls we get about trees damaged or construction stuff being piled on.
So through you, Madam Chair, that was the case at that time. We're at 99% now with the new changes that were approved by Council.
And when did those changes take effect? They were the 2017?
They were the 2017. We did the approval for 6 temporary positions. Through the 2018 budget process, we're seeking approval for them to go permanent.
Are they in the funded or unfunded category right now?
Through you, Madam Chair, they're in the unfunded category, the new and enhanced, but it's net zero.
It's net zero because of the fee?
Revenue, yeah, the fees.
The revenues from. So they're unfunded currently, but net zero, so we'd have to move them over from the one column to the other. Why weren't they put in the funded column? Just out of curiosity.
So Through the chair, my understanding is they try to group like things together so that anything that was new, even if it was net zero, was packaged as new, and then council, and through budget committee and council, you have the opportunity to move those.
But even net zero things, so stuff that's not going to cost any money that council put decisions on that said referred to staff for the budget.
So the criteria was anything new, so it wasn't the net impact.
Do you think this was an attempt to make the superhero motion just that much bigger for councillors to come swoop in and save things?
I think the intent was just to keep like things together.
That's a good answer. And thank you. I have no more questions.
Thank you very much. Any other questions of staff? Councillor Doucette.
Could you just touch on the elimination of the posting of notice of applications for tree injury? I'm guessing this has saved a lot of staff time. I know it saved a lot of councillors' staff time. Could you just touch on what this has done and what it's achieved?
Through you, Madam Chair, it actually saved approximately 21 days in the process, in the application process. So when staff issue a permit to injure a tree, that's anticipating that the tree will receive the will do fine, right? So the tree will be healthy. It can withstand the injury. So it's really a tree preservation permit. And so what it's done is it's saved a lot of time. We don't have to post. We don't have to respond to resident queries on what's happening with the tree. In fact, when we issue a permit, it's because it's a healthy tree and it can withstand the construction.
So you think it's successful?
It's been received very well. We haven't received one complaint, and in fact, it just speeded up a huge amount of time in processing the applications.
Okay, thank you very much. No, I think it has been successful, so thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome to Councillor Cressy. I saw him, and I saw Councillor Shmary. Good morning. Happy New Year. Does anyone else have questions of staff? Okay, seeing none. I do, actually. So, so this is based on someone calling in if they see no tree protection zone or some hazardous situation for a tree, someone has to call in to report it?
Through you, Madam Chair, we have reactive and proactive programs running right now.
So with the proactive, I mean, I was always kind of wondering if there could be a better partnership with buildings. So when they're out there, bylaw officers are out there inspecting the job sites or the renos, that they could say, you know, just tick a box, oh, we got to let forestry know the tree protection zone's not there, or there's a backhoe on the tree routes or something like that. So then forestry's not always running out to check the sites because buildings are there more often than you.
Through you, Madam Chair, so you're actually suggesting that their bylaw officers identify the infraction instead of, right? Something we certainly consider. We have an ongoing working group with planning, city building, and legal to possibly consider that. We're always looking for new ways to improve the process, so we'll make note of that.
Okay, thanks. Anything else? Anyone to speak? Councillor Doucette?
Very quickly, just thank you very much to forestry and staff. Each time we review, I think we come up with you know, those loops we're missing, the gaps where residents sometimes aren't listening to us, and I think this is a good report moving forward. I think it has made more understanding of residents. When they used to see that sign up, they thought the tree was coming down. We would be inundated with phone calls, you can't do this and you can't do that, and yet it was actually just a permit to injure a tree, or actually to protect a tree when there was construction going on. Really, really happy to hear that your attendance at complaints of trees not having proper protection, or as the councillor said, having a backhoe. For mine, I had an enormous dumpster right by the tree on several occasions, actually. So really happy to hear that we've increased our ability to get out and protect these trees quicker. So thank you very much for this report.
Thank you very much, Councillor Doucette. Anyone else to speak? Seeing none. Someone like to move staff recommendation? Move a seat. Okay, Councillor Layton, all in favor?
Oh, pardon me, can we send direction or information to the Budget Committee? Is that possible at this stage? No? Okay, thanks.
Good try.
I'll move the staff recommendations to receive.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed, that carries. Thank you very much. One item done. So PE 24.2, tree protection through the Committee of Adjustment process. Anyone to, any deputations? Committee of Adjustment, does that interest you at all? All right. Questions of staff, Councillor DeBaremaker.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair, to staff. The recommendations before us are just to receive your report for information. And I think certainly for myself and maybe other councillors, maybe some of our frustration has been when you have a house on a lot with an 80-year-old oak tree. Somebody decides to put in a swimming pool or a garage or a sunroom and take down that 80-year-old tree, quote, as of right, because they're allowed the square footage. I've had a situation, a number of situations, where I will say, well, if you built your garage on the other side, you could save the mature tree. Some developers or owners will say, yeah, okay, I really don't care what side of the house my garage is on. I'll tell my architect to flip it. Others just look at you and say, well, I have as of right, so I'm not even talking to you. So are there recommendations or ideas that the Forestry Department has when, in your opinion or your staff's opinion, there is an ability to save an 80-year-old oak tree on the site, but the person's just uncooperative, that we actually would have the ability to not issue a building permit or not grant an as-of-right minor variance?
So through you, Madam Chair, the approach with urban forestry is the exact same, Councillor. We try and provide comments that would suggest altering the footprint to save the tree. But in the case of as of right, we're kind of limited. The bylaw does say may issue a permit, but in terms of that, we can't frustrate the Planning Act. And we work very closely with building and city planning. And when there are no alternatives, we have to issue that permit because we're simply not applicable law.
You say when there are no alternatives, but have you found occasion where there are alternatives, but an investor, a speculator, an architect, a homeowner, whoever they may be, just says, well, yeah, again, I want the swimming pool shaped like a big rectangle instead of a square, and therefore the tree's coming down, just really because I don't want to cut, rake the leaves or something.
So through you, Madam Chair, in most cases, it won't be a swimming pool. It'll be the house diameter growing, because that's where the trees are in the as of right. Swimming pool example is really stretching it. So these are where trees are very close to the existing footprint of the home. We have very few of them actually take place where we're having to issue permits in that particular case, but they do happen. So again, we can provide comments when these trees are being recommended for removal. However, we have no standing authority to deny the permit, nor does building, because it's under the provincial legislation.
And what would be required to change that?
The report identifies that we could apply to the ministry to suggest that trees become applicable law, but then I'd have to defer to legal and building to answer what that actually means.
This mic is working, but this mic is
Yes. And he's got the diapers to prove it.
I happen to be
a record note that Councillor Layton has been waiting to say that for 7 years at council. 7 years he's been waiting to say that.
Finally. Well, through you, Madam Chair, if it gives the council or any comfort, we have ramped up the training that we provide to the Committee of Adjustment panel members. In fact, at the last major training session, we had Parks, Forestry, and Rec staff in. And we certainly have raised the sensitivity with the members to be on guard for applications where this kind of issue, the opportunity to flip a driveway to accommodate a tree issue, is certainly heightened on the minds of the members. And on occasion, matters are deferred by the panel so that the applicant and the department, the relevant departments, can look at it further. So it does happen increasingly.
Just to add to that too, I'm going to parse out your question a little bit, because swimming pools don't require building permits. So where you have a building permit application that is as of right, through the application process, we identify tree issues, and we ensure that our colleagues in urban forestry are aware of all building permit applications that have a potential impact to a tree. We provide information to our clients when they make applications. We require tree declaration forms as part of the application process. That information is shared with urban forestries. So where there's a potential to impact a tree for an as-of-right development or project, I don't even call it development, like your example in a garage, that for urban forestry is engaged and knows that this project has happened, so that they can discuss with the owner of the property relocation of a portion of the addition or construction so as to not damage or destroy the tree. With respect to the building permit, though, private tree, city tree bylaws are not listed as applicable law under the building code, and as such, the chief building official doesn't have the ability to refuse to issue a building permit. Having said that, the issuance of the building permit isn't all the necessary approvals that are required for a proposal to proceed, so the owner still has to comply with the private tree bylaw and get approval from urban forestry before proceeding and removing that tree. So the building permit does not authorize the tree removal. The two processes are separate and distinct, and of course, like I say, in terms of communication and providing information to urban forestry so that they could become involved on a particular project like you had described, it's as of right, to sway and protect the tree and get the tree protected. That happens currently.
Thank you very much. Councillor, oh, sorry, anyone else outside of committee? No. Councillor Ajamari was next. I think Councillor Doucette.
The last speaker really answered a lot of questions. There's just one little thing left. At the bottom of page 5, the issuance of a permit to remove or injure the tree may still be denied.
In terms of that, I think you're speaking of
city-owned trees.
City-owned trees, which is, I would defer to my colleagues in urban forestry to answer that.
So through you, Madam Chair, what that refers to in that paragraph is that the Committee of Adjustments does not have authority over making recommendations on city properties. So in this case, if urban forestry made comment through memo to Committee of Adjustments that we disagreed with the application because we didn't want the tree to be removed, they have the authority to not agree with us. And in that particular case, we may still not issue a permit to remove the city trees. So there would be ongoing negotiations. It sounds cruder than it is. In fact, it's a well-working relationship, but we make recommendations so that the applicant knows that they may have to deal with urban forestry to, in fact, get that city tree removed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Doucette.
So I'm going to harp on the same topic. Parking pads. In my ward, a lot of people are renovating the homes, making the building wider, which means they can no longer use the driveway to get to parking at the back of the property, and then they come for a parking pad. They don't come to transportation for parking pad, they do it through Committee of Adjustment. You've got a great big tree in front of the house, and the condition on the approval of the house and everything is on the city approving the parking pad. Forestry writes saying we can't support this because there's a tree, it would have to be removed, or literally the parking pad is right up to the trunk, as I have several in my ward. If we don't approve the permit to either remove a tree or injure a tree, how are these parking pads still allowed to go in? My understanding is that if it's conditional on the city approving something and we don't approve it, because transportation won't approve it if there's a tree there, forestry doesn't approve it because there's a tree there, why are they still being built? maybe I'm in the wrong committee for that, but why are they still being built? Because that tree now has permanent hard surface right up to the trunks. You can tell my frustration, right?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. The scenario that we're knowledgeable of in the Committee of Adjustment that does occur where the committee members give approval is at times for parking, a variance needed because parking's not permitted, for example, in front of the main wall of a building. Mm-hmm. But like I said in my previous answer to the other councillor, we flag those scenarios and we flag them with our colleague departments. In fact, within city planning, we actually comment, the community planning side of city planning comments to the C of A side, and we flag these issues, and I can say with fairly good comfort that the vast majority of these scenarios that concern you, we do capture and try and resolve appropriately. I can't speak to one that may have happened that has concerned you, but we're absolutely capturing those concerns.
I guess it's when it's the approval is conditional upon them being allowed to do a parking pad, and as a city we wouldn't approve it. Anyway, maybe I'm going to dive deeper into this because Committee of Adjustment needs to understand, and I do thank you for going out and talking to them and educating them. I think that's a great step forward. There's my little bit of my speech, but thank you.
Cheating there. All right, thank you very much. Anyone else with questions? All right, seeing that I do. So I want to talk about the tree declaration form. So if I'm doing a reno, I'm filling out the tree declaration form as the homeowner. Do I not need an arborist? Should I not have an arborist help me fill that out or fill that out for me, or it's just me?
Through you, or to you, Madam Chair. No, that just identifies, so building has done a great job by identifying that the tree bylaw exists. By having this tree declaration form, the applicant who's applying for a building permit has to then consciously identify that there are trees that could be impacted. That form directs them to urban forestry where they get all the information. So there's no at that point they may not even need an arborist report. They're just identifying that a tree's there. Our staff then inform them if there's an impact, and then we inform them that an arborist report may be required and what the steps are to take place.
So what if there's a tree there and I don't identify it? Before you, forestry gives their feedback, does forestry go out and visit the site, or how do you know that I'm not fibbing?
So, through Madam Chair, that happens, right? And this is why we've introduced the contravention team. When it goes through the planning, city planning, and C of A provides us with the applications in advance, we'll go out and look at them because there's a variance. When it goes through building, they're working within that footprint. They don't go through the C of A. Then they have them sign a declaration. They have to come to us. People don't follow bylaws. In some cases, most times they do. But the ones that don't, through the wisdom of council, you've authorized the ability for us to increase our staffing for compliance, and that's where we're tracking and managing all of those. So like I said, they go hand in hand, the compliance with the application.
And do you think it's kind of too early for them to do they do the tree declaration initially, but is there something like maybe you think it's not going to, your reno's not going to infringe on the tree roots at all, and then as you get building, I don't know, you realize your foundation is actually larger than you thought, or the material you use is, I don't know, bigger, and then it does infringe on the tree. Is there kind of a second declaration we should do once they say, as me as a homeowner, I realize, oh my gosh, it's actually coming too close to the tree? Do I then declare, is there a process for me to declare to you, or do I just hide that fact?
We'd hope that people would then come back to us with the alteration. However, the committee that we put together through the direction from council with building, planning, legal, and forestry, we were asked to look at all those scenarios, and we drafted process flows, assuming all of these things that you just talked about. We have enough governance in place right now to protect most, like 90% of what we're doing. So 90% of the population will comply. We're going to get the 10% that don't. That 10%, when you're talking with 600,000 trees on city streets, 10 million in the city, we're going to get non-compliance. The wisdom of council, you've given us the authority to go out and proactively patrol these areas, so we'll find them. And I think the chief building officer has a comment.
So, Councillor, through you, Madam Chair, the purpose of the tree declaration form at the time of building permit application, we do that for all sorts of projects, as of right projects, housing, but also for small renovations, additions to rears of houses, single family garages. So we're talking about thousands of projects that are not very large in scope. To require an arborist report, for example, for someone who's building a small private garage at the rear of the property is quite onerous and expensive, and that is an issue that we're cognizant of. So the tree declaration form that is required as part of an application is to do a bunch of things. It's to inform the applicants and the owners of their responsibility of the tree bylaw. It's to make them think about the tree bylaw. It's to make them think if their project, hey, do I have a tree here that I wasn't thinking about might be protected? So it's an education process. Then it's also, that form is also, like I said, shared with, and all the applications are shared with our colleagues in urban forestry so that they're aware that there's a project here that may or may not impact a tree, so their proactive staff and their new enforcement staff can take steps. So it's done for a variety of reasons. Education, information, sharing information with our colleagues in urban forestry. I appreciate the concept of requiring an arborist report, but that is very, very expensive undertaking, and in most cases is not necessary. Because we are able to achieve compliance with and protect trees through this education process. One of the comments earlier was about improved communication between inspections and urban forestry. We've done a lot of that stuff with Toronto Water recently on certain initiatives. Certainly something that we can discuss further, and I think would also enhance and improve the process.
Thanks. And then what about the repeat offenders who the bad builders, the disrespectful developers who chronically do this? Do we have some sort of blacklist or some list that we would know, hey, watch this guy, and we would extra monitor them? Or
we'll develop that list. We just started the compliance, as you know, in late 2016 and 2017. We've generated fees in over 700,000. So people are getting them and they're hurting, and a few councillors are seeing the calls come in. So I guess what we're going to see is we'll start to monitor that as part of the process, and those repeat offenders, will be dealt with, I'm sure, in a different way.
And last question, I'm just taking liberties as the chair. Can we, what is it pie in the sky thinking to think that the province would ever, or if we ask them to include tree bylaws in the building code so that the trees have strength too? I don't know. Who's anyone able to?
Madam Chair, perhaps legal could answer that. Certainly a request could be made, but I suspect that the province might take the view that they have already achieved a balance between public interest and private land rights with respect to the provisions of the City of Toronto Act and the, as Mr. Angelucci indicated, the applicable law provisions of the building code.
Okay, so it's not a no. Thanks. It's snowballs. Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? Questions? Anyone to speak? Councillor de Beermaker, Deputy Mayor de Beermaker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering if you, as the chair, or another member of committee might move deferral of this item for 1 month. That would just give myself and maybe some of our colleagues on this committee to talk further with our forestry staff and planning staff and legal staff about trying to make improvements. These two items have been here because there are gaps, there are people, and the infill that's happening across our city is going to continue as a we get roughly 100,000 people per year moving into the GTA. Certainly there are some older, larger lots, whether they're 50-foot frontage or 100-foot frontage, where somebody comes in to sever a lot. One half is more or less, I'll call it treed. The other half is where they lived. Now that they're retiring or the kids are selling the house, they're severing a lot, and you look at that new lot and you go, well, you're going to cut down a whole bunch of 60 or 70 or 80-year-old trees. And then technically, there's nothing that we can do to stop it other than comment on it. There are instances where people are expanding their house or building you can't even call them monster homes anymore, but they're taking a 1,000-square-foot bungalow and turning it into a 3,500 or 4,000-square-foot house. They could build that 4,000-square-foot home without taking down the mature tree. But because they have as of right to build 4,000 square feet due to the lot size, we can't tell them to actually change the shape of their home or to do this or to do that. We can make suggestions, but we can't stop them. And I think our bylaws don't last 1 week or 1 month. They're going to last decades. And over the next number of decades, this population of this city is going to increase dramatically. And I would appreciate to have more time. I have been certainly going back and forth with staff this week over budget items. I haven't had the opportunity to go into the details of this report, and maybe there'll be no changes, but I would ask that we defer this for a month so that all of us can do our due diligence to make sure we're doing every single thing we can to protect every single tree. Because we were at an event last night talking about planting new trees. But when you have a 60 or 80 or 100-year-old tree, just one of them that comes down, that's generations of families that will not have the benefit of that tree while we plant a new tree on the city boulevard that hopefully survives and grows to be 100 years old or 80 years old someday. But I would just ask for a little bit more time to allow me and perhaps others to talk with our staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor de Bermaker. Councillor Doucette, did you want to speak?
Will, if necessary, move the motion for the deferral. We're not asking for any more staff reports on this. I think, if I understand correctly, we're just asking for councillors to understand the process. Every councillor is dealing with C of A. Every councillor is dealing with C of A. And a lot of our C of A cases do deal with trees. And I think it's a good idea. It's been on the agenda. We can't assume that every councillor has had a chance to read it yet, and I think by doing a 1 month deferral, it will allow councillors to have the opportunity. And again, if there is things we need to do to the province, for instance, I don't have a problem with that at all.
Okay, anyone else to speak? All right, so there's a motion to defer this item 1 month, I guess, till February, next cycle. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. All right. Thank you very much. Moving right along. PE 24.3, the Parks Ambassador service levels. So we're just figuring out if this is actually before us. Do we? All right, sure. First of all, is anyone here to depute? No. All right, so we have questions from visiting councillors, and also reminding people this is at the Budget Committee too, as you know. It is. Yeah. Okay, so we'll take that offline. Councillor Wong-Tam.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to ask questions of staff. My question to you, staff, is that in the report it highlights a significant increase in encampments and service calls to the park ambassador that we have. Can you elaborate on what the trends are that you're seeing in terms of its relationship downtown, central, waterfront, and then the rest of the city?
Through the chair, the overall increase has been approximately 15% more requests to go out to the parks, and 15% more referrals to streets to homes and things like that. Overall, we saw in 17 we saw a slight decrease in the downtown and more of an increase in the horseshoe around downtown. But that's just a one-year observation. It's not a trend. But the overall level, total number of requests and work is up 15% year over year.
And is that largely due to new encampments and the expansion of encampments that we're seeing in the parks and ravines?
It's a combination of many things. It's numbers of people doing inappropriate activities in parks, illegal substances in parks. It is panhandling. It is encampments. It is people staying overnight on a bench. It's a lot of different activities.
Thank you. And currently we have one full-time park ambassador supplemented with 3 seasonal workers. But that one full-time park ambassador in 2017 logged over 14,000 work orders, made over 700 referrals to Streets to Home and other social services. Would you say that, and completed also 16 safety audits in parks and neighborhoods, would you be able to talk about the response time? Because it seems like a lot of work for a very small team.
Through the chair, the response times can be, they're highly influenced by where the staff are when we get the calls. If we've got all of a sudden a crew in a park doing maintenance work, they observe some kind of activity and they need the parks ambassadors and they make the call and we're just around the corner, it can be pretty quick. But some of these, the calls are very unpredictable. You think tomorrow is going to be busy in one area, and so you go to that area, and it only turns out that it turns out very, very different. It's very fluid, very dynamic, and we have to be able to respond as quickly as we can, and that's the best we do.
With respect to the trends of the encampments and the work orders being further and further out of the downtown core, recognizing that Parks Ambassador program began largely as a downtown downtown initiative, how do you adjust for the time and travel? Because there's only 8 or 12 hours to the workday, let's just say, for example, and you are now commuting 2 hours to the site to where you need to go to investigate. How does that factor into the new recommendations you've put in before us?
Through the chair, first, in several ways, we would propose that if we had more crews, so up to 3 crews, that we would focus 2 downtown, and 1 would handle the other calls and be more mobile, so with a truck and be able to respond across the rest of the city. However, it could be a quiet day in the east part of downtown and there's a call out in Scarborough. It would just make that call much quicker if we had another crew, and we wouldn't be left without a crew downtown. So it would just open up a lot of different possibilities for us.
In your report, it's highlighted several times that you don't have established service levels, and yet you're making a suggestion that this program can be expanded largely because of the volume of work has increased. Is it a worthwhile pursuit to establish citywide service levels so that we know exactly moving forward whether or not the Parks Ambassador program is meeting the needs of the communities and neighborhoods that it's intended to serve?
Through the chair, I would say yes, that's a worthwhile cause.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wong Tam. Anyone else with questions outside? Oh, Councillor Troisi.
Sure. I'm not sure if you're aware of this because, Richard, you weren't in Recreation when I created this position in 2003, and Janie, you weren't the GM. But we did allot an FTE in 2003 to oversee the homeless issues in wards 20, 27, and 28. It then spiked to 2 FTEs and 4 seasonals in 2004 because of that success. So I just wanted to know, given that it's now a citywide initiative, whether or not when you increase the number of staff, whether or not there would still be a concentration in the wards that they were intended to oversee.
Through the chair, the intention is to focus 2 crews, so 4 staff in the mainly the 3 wards of downtown, with the 3rd crew being more of a roving crew. However, we would have the flexibility to bring that roving crew into the downtown, or we would have the flexibility, depending on where the calls are, to have one of the downtown crews go and assist something that was close to where they were when a call comes.
Great. You speak about health and safety in the report. Does that mean with the increased staffing levels, you would double up?
Through the chair, currently the program has only 1 FTE. That's 1 full-time position. So during the sort of the off-season, when that individual goes to look after calls, they are on their own, and that's a safety issue. It's always nice to have somebody with you when you're dealing with other people who might become aggressive or might say you did things to them or whatever. It's always good to have somebody there with them. So that's the health and safety issue that we're speaking to. We would work in pairs.
Okay, so you would probably have 3 platoons then with the total number of 6?
Yes, that's correct.
Right. I think I still had one more question.
Thank you very much. Councillor Doucette, I think you had questions.
So thank you very much for this report. Obviously, since this program was initiated, things have changed in our city. I know when this came before us once before, I was asking how I get them out into my ward more frequently. I know they're very, very good at coming into High Park, where we do have permanent residents now. But we also have issues in other parks with panhandling, drinking, and whatnot. This report originally was not in the budget process. So could you just explain how we have actually got it in through the budget process? Because I know we'd like to move motions to make sure that we can try and get this funding for 2018.
So through the chair, I think the idea was to have the options for expansion of the program and the cost for expanding the program before Parks and Environment, so that there was an understanding of what some of the options were from a budget perspective.
The chair, the way it flowed through the budget committee, we were asked so that, because we realized that any decision coming out of P&E may not make budget committee on time, we put a briefing note before. We were asked to develop a briefing note so that budget committee had basically the similar, it's a briefing note, but it's a similar options before budget committee, so you have it there for consideration.
So through the chair, just to add, because Richard's filling me in, we do have a budget briefing note going forward to the next budget committee meeting as well.
But that still means that councillors or councillor, someone needs to move a motion at budget insisting that this does get into the 2018 budget.
That's correct.
So the briefing note is fantastic. Thank you very much. So the budget committee will at least know what we're talking about when we go and ask for this. Excellent. Thank you. That's just a yes, and again, me rambling.
All right. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Anyone to speak on this issue? Councillor Troisi?
that this is a very unique position that we have. And I think the success of the park ambassador is who we hire. Non-judgmental. I think everyone knows who Troy Ford is. I think that's been a big success, is the personality. So I'm just hoping that in recruiting that we're looking more of that type of personality in order to outreach to our homeless.
Thank you very much. Anyone, Councillor Wong Tam, did you want to mention that?
Yes, I would like to speak, however, I just want to make sure that the motion...
Okay, so we'll come in committee and we can go back. That's okay.
That's okay.
We're quite flexible in this committee.
This is a very good committee, thank you.
We do a lot of yoga. All right, Councillor Doucette.
I want to thank staff for bringing this forward, and I want to definitely thank staff for putting the briefing note forward. I support this 100%. As I say, times have changed. I have a big park, as everyone probably knows by now. There's beautiful places to go and live in the park. We know that as well. And we need the staff who understand the people who are living in our parks, how to interact with them, how to get them involved with streets to homes. And as I say, recently in my ward, we have other situations going along our main business areas. A lot of panhandlers, and we understand that because the panhandlers tell me that they can get the money they need in a very short amount of time, whereas if they're in another location, because my residents are very generous. But that sometimes means that then they go and visit the LCBO and go into our local parks. And I want someone who can go and talk to them to help them, not just go and move them on. We want to get to whatever their issue is. We've helped people streets to homes. I hand out my business card quite frequently. So we are helping each individual, but I think that this extra bodies on the street will be great. I hope we will have male-female ratios as well, because not all of our homeless, not all of our people in our parks are male. So I think we do need a mixture, and I think, again, consider that when hiring. So thank you very much. Got my full support.
Thank you very much, Councillor Doucette. And Councillor Wong Tam, I think your motion is ready.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Chair, and for the opportunity again to speak. I want to just, I would like to place a motion, which I think the Chair is going to take carriage of directing the General Manager of Parks, Forestry and Recreation to establish adequate service levels for the Parks Ambassador Program so it can meet the increasing citywide demand, and to have them report back in the first quarter of 2019 after the election. And I want to thank staff for bringing forward this report. I know that we've had numerous conversations over the months leading up to this report appearing before this committee, largely because of the incredible demand that we've seen. One of the interesting numbers that really jumps out at me in this report is the number of encampments that we are seeing citywide, with 300 plus more encampments in 2017 than we have experienced in the year 2016. And these encampments, of course, is symptomatic of things that are not necessarily parks related. It goes back to social determinants of health, including the fact that people don't have safe and adequate housing or perhaps shelters. But what it does do is that it takes a lot of resources from one full-time staff person, because you've got to go back and constantly build relationships, make sure that that individual or individuals or families in the encampment can recognize that there are other services that the city could provide, and then eventually move them out. This is very intense case management work. You really do need some wraparound supports, including social workers, outreach workers, mental health workers, and so forth. And all of that is combined and embodied in the face and the name of Troy Ford. And that's a Herculean lift to ask anyone to do. And he's been doing it by himself for such a long time. And I can't imagine if he is that effective as one individual, is what would happen if we actually expanded the program to try to elevate the service levels to be much more responsive on the ground. And I think that's a very good thing. What I think we need to do as as councillors who have experienced these encampments in our wards and the neighborhoods that we serve have experienced them, is that we need to make sure we get this message loud and clear across the Budget Committee. There will be a lot of competing interests, no doubt. And we need to find our champions and make sure we are able to muster up the 23 votes to get it adopted at Council, because I can't think of too many other programs in the city. Many of them are struggling for resources as we manage the austerity budgets, but I can't think of another program that is so underfunded, where you have an office of one person delivering citywide on-site intense case management service, and the fact that he hasn't quit on us is quite exceptional. So I want to thank staff for doing this report and highlighting for us what we need to do as decision makers. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wong Tim. Any questions about the motion? All right. Anyone else to speak in committee? All right. So we all in favor of the motion? All right. So item as amended. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Fantastic. Thank you. All right. Moving right along to biodiesel, PE 24.4, evaluating biodiesel for city fleet operations. And we do have a deputation on that one. So we will call down Aaron Freeman from Pivot Strategies Consulting. Welcome, Aaron. Have you been to committee before or City Hall? All right. Well, you're in for a treat. So we have 2 clocks, one behind you, which you can't see.
I do a point of personal privilege.
Oh,
Aaron is the former boss of Councillor Layton, so if Councillor Layton seems to take this out by being mean to Aaron, just watch him.
Holly.
Well, that conflict was not declared at the conflict. So there's a clock here and you have 5 minutes, and then you may or may not be grilled afterwards. Thanks.
Did I pass the first test?
All right. Well, only we can't repeat jokes at committee.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair and members of committee. My name is Aaron Freeman, and I'm the head of Pivot Strategic Consulting, which works with a range of associations and companies who are advancing environmental policy solutions. One such company is Canada Clean Fuels, who joins me here today. Canada Clean Fuels is a full-service trucking fuel distribution company based here in Toronto, and Canada's leading distributor of biodiesel. Biodiesel is a fuel processed from biological matter and then blend with regular diesel for use in diesel engines. It achieves a 92% GHG reduction over diesel with significant reductions in other air pollutants. It's widely used in municipal and corporate fleets. Examples include York Region, Guelph, Kingston, Loblaws, Labatt's, and Robert Transport. The state of Minnesota mandates 10% biodiesel, a 10% blend, is moving to 20% in May of this year. I've tabled with my remarks a study by Transport Canada, which notes that biodiesel use in municipal fleets goes back to 2002 in Canada. Brampton was the first municipality. And the study also notes that biodiesel delivers similar torque, horsepower, and kilometers per liter than conventionally powered diesel. I've also included a list of testimonials, which I've provided to the committee, on the high rates of success that municipal and corporate fleets have had with biodiesel. As the materials referenced in the motion that was tabled before this committee last month state, City Council directed staff to develop selection criteria for alternative fuels in its Consolidated Green Fleet Plan in 2014. In February 2017, this committee further directed staff to report back on potential GHG reductions and costs associated with the use of different diesel fuels on appropriate vehicles. The scope of this motion was limited to diesel fuels and did not include alternatives to diesel such as electric vehicles, hydrogen, and natural gas. While alternatives to diesel are emerging and could be phased in over many years, it's clear that the city is going to be purchasing significant amounts of diesel for many years to come. As long as the city is using diesel, it should be the lowest carbon form of diesel that's available on a cost-effective basis. Yet nearly 4 years after the Green Fleet Plan and 1 year after last February's motion of this committee, staffs report that they are still conducting analysis on biodiesel and renewable diesel in comparison to other fuel options, such as natural gas and electricity. I would like to respond to some of the concerns that were raised about biodiesel. Number one, as noted by Transport Canada, biodiesel requires no new infrastructure investments, either at the fueling facility or in the vehicle. Number two, there are well-established fuel suppliers in the province. In a recent RFP to supply biodiesel to the City of Waterloo, for example, there were 8 bidders. Compare that to the last Toronto RFP for regular diesel, where there were only 2 bidders. Thirdly, the GHG footprint of biodiesel is very well established through widely used tools such as GH Genius, which is the tool that's used by the Government of Ontario and most other governments. Fourthly, it should be noted that GH Genius calculates reductions based on the full life cycle of the fuel. Finally, while the city's current fuel contract does offer a provision to supply biodiesel, it can reasonably be expected that there will be a cost added to the contract to provide the fuel if it's done through the existing contract, given that it would not be done through a competitive bid. I'd like to finally just go over 2 issues around biodiesel that are dealt with in the jurisdictions that use the fuel. The first, as noted in the staff report, biodiesel has a lower gel point, so this affects performance in extremely cold weather. This could easily be dealt with by using a lower blend during colder months. This is what Minnesota does. I should note that Minnesota has much colder winters than we do, and I've got some data in my in the appendix to my remarks that demonstrates this. The second issue is with regard to filter changes. Because biodiesel cleans the engine as it's used, it removes dirt and dust that is accumulated from before biodiesel was used in that engine. As a result, at least initially, the filters need to be changed more often. Suppliers ensure that their customers are aware of this and change their protocols with regard to filter changes. In conclusion, as the city pursues its Transform TO climate plan and seeks to reduce emissions from its transportation fleet, biodiesel can offer a cost-effective way to achieve the city's goals. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to present before you today. And I welcome your questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the speaker? Councillor Wong-Tam first.
Yes, thank you very much. Oops. Sorry, I don't have, the light is not on in my microphone. That's why I keep tapping it to see if it's on. So my apologies. I want to just have your reflections on the report that's before us. It actually outlines a case for biofuel and the switch and transfer over, but it also says that we should be, that the committee should be receiving this for information. What do you think should be the recommendation moving forward? Because it's not action-oriented right now.
I would say that the city's contract for diesel fuel was negotiated about 4 years ago. It began 3 years ago. It was a 2-year contract at a fixed price, and it renews each year automatically. So it's just been renewed for 2018. If you don't retender, then it automatically flips over. Our recommendation is to tender that contract for biodiesel, and your worst case scenario would be that you end up not having a better price than you have today, your fixed price today. Your best case scenario is you beat that price and you end up with a lower price for fuel using a cleaner fuel.
Thank you very much. That was very helpful.
Cheers.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Layton, I think, was next, followed by Councillor Doucette.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, or Madam Chair. Through you, on the lower blends in colder months, so Minnesota has figured out that they can readjust their fuel mix, and who does that? Is it the fleet operators, or is it the provider, the service provider that?
So in Toronto, you've got your own fueling stations. So the supply of biodiesel from your supplier to those fueling stations would be, say, a B5, a 5% blend in the winter months, and a B20 in the remaining months.
And that's simple enough just to, or like there's no other equipment changes that would be needed? We could.
No. Suppliers already do that for their existing clients.
And we can just anticipate that the months of January, February, and March are going to be colder in advance of making the call. They predetermine that in the order.
Yeah, it's not. It wouldn't be day to day. You would supply that for the winter months.
Yeah. So take a chunk of time, and then it's just the tanker truck that shows up is already pre-mixed.
Yeah, you're not staring at the Weather Channel wondering what kind of.
We don't have to have any staff on site that have some in-depth understanding in the chemistry of how these fuels are formulated or anything like that.
That would be done by your supplier.
Just on the filter changes as well, do we have an idea of how, particularly at the beginning, what that maintenance might look like, the additional maintenance? And then you say it cleans the engine. That's like part of every commercial for an automotive part that I've and I quite frankly don't understand the science behind that, how it automatically cleans it. So perhaps, does that lengthen the time that the engine can be used? Is the engine the limiting factor in the time, the value of that vehicle? I'm just trying
to. So the Transport Canada study does talk about this a little bit, and there are other studies that have demonstrated that there is a slight engine improvement in performance using biodiesel because it is cleaner. It is slight. It's measurable, but it's not a. We don't use. I don't think the industry uses that as a selling point for the fuel. There's other parts of the value proposition, but because it does operate more cleanly than regular diesel. I mean, regular diesel is one of the dirtiest fuels going for vehicles. It does have that quality to it, but the downside is you do need to change the filter a little bit more often.
Okay, and
I can get you more detail as to exactly how much more often according to the protocols that are used.
And you said York Region uses this, biodiesel. And then what was the other region? It was
York Region, Guelph, Kingston.
Oh, Guelph and Kingston.
And the state of Minnesota, the entire state of Minnesota actually mandates it at a B10 level, and that's going up to B20 in May of this year.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Doucette is next, followed by Councillor Matlow.
Thank you. So just carrying on a little bit on what Councillor Layton, very good questions, which were some of mine. So York, Guelph, Kingston, Brampton, local, close to us. How long have they been using biodiesel?
So Brampton came on in 2002. I should say that Brampton is no longer on biodiesel. They've joined the Metrolinx contract, which is not a biodiesel contract. So, but the ones that I mentioned, so York, Guelph, Kingston. Sorry, you want to know how long each of them?
How long have they been using it, basically?
I can get you that information. I don't have it on hand.
What I'm trying to look at is people, cities, similar weather to us. How long they've been using it? What good, bad, and the ugly? I guess really. Are their experiences? So we can say, as you've mentioned, again, overlapping a little bit with others, different times of year, you change your ratios. The provider would do that automatically. We don't need someone on our staff to tell us or tell you what to do. One of the concerns we have, obviously, moving forward with Transform TO, is one of the big areas we're wanting to do. Toronto Atmospheric Fund, environment, all of us are wanting to reduce our greenhouse gases, wanting to reduce our carbon emission. How will this help us reduce what goes out into the air?
So with regard to your first question, I don't know if my materials were circulated, but on the very last page, there's a list of testimonials from different jurisdictions, and that gives you a sense of their level of satisfaction with it. I can get you a lot more. In the States, there's actually been even wider use in not just Minnesota, Iowa, a number of other states, as well as private corporate fleets. Some of you know the Flying J brand, which is part of the Pilot Flying J chain in the U.S. I can give you a list of all of their stations across the United States. So it is in broad use. With regard to your second question.
Emissions reduction. That's what I'm really wanting to know.
So it depends on the blend. So also in your materials, you'll see a list of feedstocks and what the carbon intensity of each of those is. So for something like yellow grease, which is used oil from restaurants primarily, that's actually a very clean, and in some cases that's actually a net negative emission when you turn that into biodiesel. The other feedstocks have different levels of carbon intensity. For Ontario, Golder and Associates have used GH Genius to calculate the carbon intensity, and you're looking at, for a B20 blend, so it's about a 92% reduction of GHGs. So for a B20 blend, you'd be at about 18.4% lower GHGs, and that's with no infrastructure requirements, basically no changes, no significant changes to your protocols, the filter issue notwithstanding. So that's literally the same nozzle going into the same tank. Higher blends, obviously greater reductions, and then there are all the other criteria, air contaminants, nitrogen oxides, and many others, which I can also get you the numbers on, but in most cases comparable numbers to the GHG reductions.
Oh, please tell me a little bit about yellow grease. I can't resist this one. What is yellow grease? How can you use it? I think it's weird and sounds wonderful.
So
I'm sorry.
It's the grease from the deep fryer.
Really?
Yeah. So it's it's cleaned up and it's used. I mean, it's refined. It's turned into biodiesel.
Oh, does everyone smell of French fries? Sorry.
Well, in the early days, there were actually vehicles that smelled like French fries and popcorn, but so it's funny you should mention it. But yeah, it is usually a blend of different feedstocks, and your carbon intensity is going to depend on the feedstock, and you can see that in the materials.
So it's also a way of actually processing the grease. I mean, where does the grease go now?
Well, it has to be disposed of. So you
dispose of it somewhere. So if we use it rather than disposing of it, we're solving two problems in one.
Which is part of the reason why it's a negative emissions in some cases and close to zero in most others. So it's also, I mean, it's an interesting one. We're talking about French fry grease, but it's a job creator as well. I mean, it creates local jobs, right? You've got a whole collection system in place because you've got hundreds of restaurants and point sources that it's being collected from. So there's actually a significant, diesel, we import every single ounce of the stuff, right, into this province, whereas this is a fuel that has a significant amount of local content, as well as local production, local refining, and local distribution associated with it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Scintillating conversations, Councillor Doucette. There you go. All right. You know what you're ordering for lunch. All right. So next, Councillor Matlow.
Hi, Aaron.
How are you, Josh?
Okay, so you've told us that biodiesel is good for the environment, good for economic development and jobs, good for the motors of our fleet. So I keep hearing what's good about it. So I'm trying to figure out, why wouldn't staff have come forward with a report today saying that we got to move on this, we got to go out and tender, we want council's support, which leads me to asking you about costs. So I'm just inferring that perhaps, because I can't think of another good reason why not to do it. What are the cost deltas between biodiesel and what we're using today?
So I'll speak only in general terms. I can't tell you what what you would get for an RFP.
But in general,
there is a cost differential. There is a delta. There's a price gap between regular diesel and biodiesel, and that depends on the volume, and it depends on a whole range of factors. But yes, biodiesel tends to be a bit more expensive as a general rule. Now, I can also tell you, well, you don't have to listen to me. I can point you to the authoritative independent analysts on the diesel market who will tell you that the discounts off the rack from 4 years ago, and 3 and 4 years ago when your contract was negotiated, were significantly less than they are today. So if you were to retender that contract, I think most independent analysts would tell you that you would probably get a much cheaper price, and you know, I mean, that's you'd have to look at that delta versus the delta on biodiesel, and I can't tell you what the difference of that is going to be. But
I suppose we could always tender, and if we didn't get the response that we were seeking, we could always go to regular diesel if we.
Well, I would actually make it, if I were you, I would make it a condition of the tender that there's a price cap. You can't bid into the tender unless you're bidding at or below what the city is currently paying.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you very much. And I just had a couple of questions, and one is, so are we concerned with suppliers at all, or we have enough inventory of suppliers?
So there are, as I said, the City of Waterloo quite recently tendered for biodiesel, 8 bidders on that contract compared to 2 bidders that you received on your for regular diesel, the city's contract 3 and 4 years ago. There are about 700 mid-market players in the province of Ontario who would be in a position, could be in a position to supply biodiesel. So supply hasn't been an issue that we're aware of in any of the municipalities that we've seen bid in on biodiesel.
Okay. And then we're doing a bit of city staff's working with U of T on this analysis. You're aware of that?
I've read about it in the report, yes.
Okay. And the last thing is, would you be able to...
Can I comment on that?
Oh, yeah, sure.
With your permission, Madam Chair. So I don't think it's a bad idea to look at alternative fuels like hydrogen and electric vehicles. You're going to be procuring diesel for quite some time, regardless of how you can phase in those different technologies. If you're interested in those technologies, I would go directly to the market and ask the market what it can provide through an RFI. But however you decide to do that, I don't think it's a bad idea to learn more about those technologies. If you were to, well, in 2014, the city through the Green Fleet initiative set us down the path at looking at those technologies. There has been no significant penetration of those technologies into the fleet thus far since then. Very limited progress in terms of new vehicles that use those technologies. I don't think anyone in this room would advocate that you could phase in those technologies to be significant players on the fleet within 5 years, let alone 10. So there is going to be procurement of diesel for that period. The diesel that's being procured should be as clean as possible.
And the last question, I'm wondering if you can circulate a performance review of Councillor Layton from your previous performance review.
He's a very good listener, is my understanding.
That's debatable. Okay. So that's it for me. Thank you very much. And seeing any other questions? No? All right. Thank you very much for your deputation. That was very informative. So now we have questions of staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So are there any, Councillor Doucette?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I know we have started looking at biodiesel. I appreciate that, and I know right now our contract allows us to do 4% of biodiesel from the company we're right now receiving our fuel from. When would be the first opportunity we could go back out to tender?
Through the chair, the existing contract including all option years, ends at the end of 2019. So the next option year to be renewed is at the end of this year.
In that tender, could we reword it to emphasize more about biodiesel? So yes, I know we're probably going to be still using regular diesel. Could we emphasize more about we are wanting to go more than just 4%? And again, having the cost cap, so it doesn't suddenly all, bidders don't all come in more than what we're paying now, but, we look at how we can save money.
Through the chair, so if the city could structure the call document to have an increase in biodiesel, either it has to meet it's going to be at a certain level right away, or to increase over time. I think whether we could put in a price cap to not be charged more than what we're paying now, I think is more of an issue, because market conditions change, and we have to factor all that in. But if the next time we go for a tender, if the direction is we want to move from where we are now to be 20 over X period of time or right away, we could structure that in subject to anything that the general manager of fleet wants at.
Through you, Madam Chair. So the current RFP that was put out and awarded has the provision in it right now for all range of biodiesels, so from 1% to 100%. So should we elect today to have B5, B10, B20, those are percentages, we could do that today. And with respect to the price provisions, and if the Chief Purchasing Officer wants to weigh it, so the price, based on our current review of all options for price and meeting with the suppliers and so forth, we're using the method for what was deemed the lowest price at the time. So our price changes weekly. But beyond that, the piece that's important to add is the city as a whole, so this is fuel for the city as a whole, enters into hedging agreements whereby it's a price swap. I'm not sure how familiar you are with prices. So 52% of the fleet's services fuel is already hedged, so the price is predetermined for 2018, and 80% of TTC's fuel is already hedged for 2018, meaning the price is already determined. So into hedging biodiesel, I'm not aware of any commodity for us to be able to hedge a biodiesel, so that would be something else we would have to look at.
But we have time between now and the end of this one-year contract to look at what wording we need, how we need to move forward with the technology, which has changed since we did our original contract with the company we're using now. Is that correct?
Through the chair, there is time. I do not know if there is enough time to do the entire process and award. It is actually a large call to put out. Now, whether Lloyd would like to add anything.
Through the chair, yes, it's as Michael has stated, we purchase approximately 130 million liters of fuel a year, around 300,000 liters a day. And so there's some great facts. As mentioned, this is already in our Green Fleet plan and looking at to move forward, which is exactly why there's some testimonials in there, why we're working with the University of Toronto, is we want to have some fact-based analysis and look at it. And the plan to get there, because it's such a large volume, it takes considerable time. It takes the better part of a year. So right now, it's tight to, even though it might sound like there's a lot of time, it's tight to have all of this done in time. The University of Toronto results will not come back until this fall, and that's based on their schedules. We can't, of course, accelerate their curriculum any faster than there.
Have we also been working with the other cities near us, Kingston, York, Guelph, and asking them for their experiences? I know one of our concerns was the actual emissions. Is it actually going to increase emissions or reduce emissions? So are we working with these other cities to learn their experiences?
Through the chair, that's actually part of the research through the University of Toronto. So beyond the fleets that might be close to us, we're quite connected with other fleets across North America. City of New York, the primary example, the largest municipal fleet in the world, very connected with them on certain things. And that's also what's precipitated the analysis with the University of Toronto. There are some definite costs associated, and I can speak to that if you like as well.
No, that's great. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Layton, you have questions?
Yes, thank you. The timing of the University of Toronto report, you said it would come back in the fall?
Through the chair, that's correct, yes.
And then would it provide us enough time to initiate a tender for 2019?
Through the chair, it's tight. I would certainly hope so. We're still, the U of T has all of our analysis and working on it. We still don't have the final timeline for when that end date would be. It's potentially October 2018, so it's a bit tight.
You'd agree that to implement any other large-scale changes to the fleet, like EV, like hydrogen, any of those options that are being evaluated, would be a longer-term effort?
Through the chair, absolutely. That's correct. That's some of the
that it would come back and say start changing the fleet to hydrogen-powered vehicles next year.
And through the chair, of course, we have on smaller scales started some of that. Fuel being the largest commodity by far.
Of course. So the timing of the report would kind of put us in a place that we would have to renew the existing contract for another year for potential changes in 2020.
Through the chair, that's potentially correct, yes.
But the study will inform whether we want to buy more biodiesel.
And as Environment and Energy Marcus has mentioned, the study will inform whether we want to buy more biodiesel, what those percentages might be, so that we can bring all of that information back to yourselves for decisions. So if I can speak to costs, right now, the current cost based on the existing contract is approximately 1 cent per percent. So meaning 10 cents of, or 10% biodiesel is approximately 10 cents. 20 is 20 and so forth. So.
And how do we think that will do if we put it out to tender again today?
Again, the current contract was based on a competitive call, and this is the winning bid. And
when was that competitive call? When was it done?
It was done in 2015 and awarded by GMC in November of 2013. 2015, sorry.
So it was 2015 when it was done. This issue with gelling and the fleet. Do we know anything about Minnesota? It looks pretty damn cold, and I'm not going to visit in those winter months. Let's make that clear. But do we know about their experience with fleet?
Through the chair, both personally and professionally, I'm actually from out that way. So
welcome to the warm country.
Yeah, and yes, absolutely. And those and the filters and the other comments around increased lubricity, which cleans sludge from crankcases, from fuel lines and tanks and chambers and so forth. Those are factors. So in biodiesel, there are actually two different areas. There's a second, what's commonly called the second generation of biodiesel, which is renewable diesel, and through a process called hydrosulfurization, it's not subject to those same climatic conditions of gelling and so forth. The supply isn't as readily available, but the potential for viability of that is significantly greater. So part of this is looking at the existing biodiesel, type 1, and type 2, more of the renewable diesel that it's refined a different way and has increased viability. And looking at that as well as the well-to-wheel analysis of what the true environmental benefits are in relation to the cost.
But the difference between this type 1 and type 2 with respect to our equipment, there's really not much of a difference, right?
Again, so that's part of, instead of assuming, because we're dealing with hundreds of millions of liters and thousands of pieces of equipment, we want to make sure we have the fact-based analysis to report back on that.
So if we issue a tender and the price comes back higher, we can rely on the existing tender to renew, correct?
Through the chair, the chief purchasing officer might be better served to answer that, but I don't think he heard the question.
With respect to if we issue a tender or a call, put out a call, and if the number comes up back higher, the renewal clause we have of the existing tender is still in effect, right?
Through the chair, if we try to do a call right now and we have that, I guess the risk that we might run is how the current incumbent views our attempts at managing the contract in bad faith, right? Because we basically try and ask, they might be someone who bids, and then we'd be looking at them, basically trying to force them to either we're going to renew your contract unless we get a better price over here.
Why did we renew the contract without going out to a tender again?
Because the tender was set up with option years, which is not unusual. We often build a contract with option years so that we can maximize our flexibility in terms of if there are budget implications that we might want to take into consideration or performance issues that we can get out of a contract earlier.
Okay. The greenhouse gas implications, maybe this is for energy and environment. There's a chart in what was submitted that demonstrates the decrease or the lower amounts of GHGs from biodiesel. Or can you just confirm that what magnitude lower are the GHGs from biodiesel from conventional diesel? Like, are we looking at a half? Are we looking at?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I could give you a number or a definitive answer. I mean, that is part of the question we're putting forward to U of T to help us answer. Yeah. So, I mean, definitely right. I mean, there is the evidence that there is a greenhouse gas impact, but it has to be evaluated in terms of the source of the biodiesel, what are we using it for, et cetera. It's not as simple as just sort of saying one municipality achieved this, and that would be the same experience in Toronto.
Did the Transportation Canada report speak to that point?
I'm not sure. I haven't read it myself yet. So.
Okay. I think at this point I'm just killing time while they get their act together. Do you have an answer for that?
Sure. I could speak to that a bit through the chair. So there's a Transport Canada report, or actually a Natural Resources Canada report, that speaks to that. And as the deputant mentioned, depending on the source, yellow grease, soy, canola, and so forth, there are some differences in end-to-end environmental benefit. That's part of what we want to assess, make sure we're doing a fact-based approach to the analysis in relation to the cost. So as I mentioned, 10% biodiesel would cost approximately $10 million a year. 20 is 20 million. So there's a noteworthy cost to it, and we want to make sure that we present all of the information to yourselves to make a fulsome decision.
So the chart that about the feed sources that's been submitted shows a rather dramatic decrease in greenhouse gas emissions from traditional diesel to some of the lowest of the GHG bio or feed sources. But even those, the palm and the soy oils would be quite dramatic decreases for the, like if you're putting in 10, 20%, that's like you're looking at more than halving it.
Last question for the last 10 minutes. Sorry.
Through the chair, yes, there's a difference. That's exactly why we included this in our Green Fleet plan for further review and analysis.
Thank you very much.
Sorry about that. It was so interesting. We couldn't stop. We were, yeah. All right. So anyone else with questions? Because I had a couple questions. Okay, great. I think you can feel and hear there's appetite for ramping up the 2019 RFP to include a heck of a lot more biodiesel. So are you open to that?
Through the chair.
Just to be blunt.
Open to the will of committee, certainly. Well, we're trying to get those results back from the University of Toronto to ensure that we make an informed decision, and if we develop a new RFP, that those facts are in there.
Yeah, and I guess the concern is that it's taking some time, which we want to be methodical and meticulous about that, but is there any way of getting that analysis back from U of T sooner than the fall, given there's no standing committees in the fall?
Through the chair, that was actually some of the questions that we've posed to them, and I think the current timelines are about as fast as we could get it. Initially, they'd proposed longer timelines yet, so we've accelerated the timeline in about half already.
And I think we've just heard all the pluses, and the downside could be if there is one at all, could be the cost. But I think I just want to clarify with you that it seems like your numbers, from what you just said in answer to one of Councillor Layton's questions, those numbers are for costs are possibly a little old. They're from 4 years ago with where the discounts were then and whatnot, the pricing. Is that correct?
Through the chair, actually our numbers are from yesterday.
From yesterday,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so,
yeah.
All right. So you're okay with possibly accelerating the RFP, and while we are still in the midst of doing the analysis with U of T, so just doing them simultaneously rather than waiting, sitting here kind of cooling our heels waiting for the analysis?
Through the chair, I'm going to let the Chief Purchasing Officer speak to that.
Well, through the chair, I think to properly inform the tender, in my mind, you would want the report to come back to committee for decision on what should be included and what decisions with respect to the level of biofuel and or whatever else the study is going to accomplish, to then be built into the tender. But if the results of that report isn't due until the fall, then the direction I would see is Fleet and Energy Office to report in early 2019 to inform that RFP that will go out shortly thereafter.
When does the RFP go out? Like how far in advance, say for 2019,
well,
for example, when does it go out?
Through the chair, we would want that contract out and awarded and with the contract negotiated prior to the end of 2019, so we would be working to do that like in first quarter of 2019. Again, the size of this contract is that it would be awarded by Government Management Committee, so we factor that in. So we want to make sure that we have enough time to get to committee to show them that we've met the requirements, if there are new requirements set by committee or council, and that we have time to negotiate and enter into that agreement so that we don't have any break. Clearly, we don't want to have a missed day where we don't have 300,000 liters of fuel available to us.
Okay, but you didn't really answer my question. So when would it go out? Like when would you go to GMC? Like what month?
Well, without sitting down with the group to factor that out, based on the previous one, we would be targeting the award to be done by Q3, Q4 of 2019 in order to be ready for the 1st of January 2020. So the call would probably go out in April, May, with all the information built into it. But that could be pulled up, that's just based on what has happened previously. If committee has provided new direction in January of 2019, that gets built in.
You're saying April, May 2018.
2019. Because if the study from the UT is coming in the fall and staff report in 2019, early 2019, with the results and direction to get direction from committee and council, that information would then be built into the RFP to be issued.
For 2020, though, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so what if we want to do something for 2019 simultaneously while the analysis is going on? We're just doing an RFP.
But then we would not be informed by the results of the...
That's okay for 2019, but 2020 could be informed by that analysis, could it not?
I think we would be at greater risk to suddenly have a one-year contract for fuel that, in terms of pricing versus what we're doing now.
Okay, that aside, when did we start the analysis with U of T? Was that 2014 or when was that?
Through you, Madam Chair, that was in 2017.
2017?
Yep. It was after the city established the memorandum of understanding with the university.
Okay, right. Yeah. Okay, I'm done now for now, but I know Councillor Doucette had another one because this is a complicated topic. Councillor Doucette.
So sorry, one of the answers to one of our questions earlier on, you said it's going to take more than a year to get the RFP ready. That's one of the reasons we can't do it for 2019, and yet you're telling the chair that you can get it ready for May of 2019 to be ready for 2020. So I'm confused with your timing. If we gave you direction now, we're still January, to do the RFP for 2019. Sorry, this is where I'm confused.
Let me just try and clarify. I think the intent is to get the results from the analysis that the university is doing to help inform the next set of criteria that we would include in a future RFP. So while, yes, the staff could come back next month or, before the council recesses for the election period, their concern is that their criteria you wouldn't have the benefit of having the results and the advice of the analysis to help inform that criteria. So I think that is a concern.
I think where the councillors here are coming from is we seem to have very smart, intelligent staff who sound as if they understand what we're wanting to try and do. And therefore, from my impression of what I've heard today, the report we're waiting for will probably confirm what our staff already know, and there may not be any tweaking we would have had to make. That's how I'm hearing things today. So,
may I maybe, having not spoken to Lloyd, offer a suggestion that staff report back next month on how feasible and what the options might be to consider an RFP for the 2019 year, and that way the staff would have time to lay out all the advantages and disadvantages and possible criteria and what the advantages would be to wait for another year. Because I think right now they're trying their best to answer questions, and that way we can lay out the options, RFPing for 2019 or waiting for the results. And that would be my recommendation, so you would have some more information upon which to make a decision.
Okay, good segue. Thank you very much. So, speakers. Sorry, Councillor Taberman outside, and then Councillor Matlow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just listening into the conversation here at committee, I'm don't know what the motion is, but I think it's going to have a very strong level of support. I just want to say part of this job is always amazing because I sit here and go, why didn't we do this 10 years ago? I was on council 10 years ago, but that was 10 years ago. Maybe the stars are more aligned now, but I think we certainly should move forward with this. This is a pretty dramatic improvement on an environmental front. And when people say, well, the cost of perhaps lowering your greenhouse gas emissions and all the particulate matter and all of those things that we don't like may have a $10 million premium, maybe 20 million, maybe 50 million for the entire city fleet. My question is, again, what is the cost of not doing it? because those externalities, when that goes into our climate, contributing to climate change, contributing to kids having asthma, contributing to people having more heart attacks, all of those things I think have to be in the analysis. But I think that it's going to come down very strongly in favor of doing the biodiesel path or migration of our fleet. I know at TTC we've voted and approved going to zero-emission vehicles, new vehicles by 2025. Some of us are actually hoping that our next order of 400 new buses in 2019 will actually hit that target of zero-emission vehicles in 2019. So the technology is changing pretty rapidly. The climate's changing pretty rapidly. We have a moral obligation to pursue this. I think our staff, again, know the markets perhaps better than we do. I feel the urgency of saying, well, I don't want to miss a window if we're signing a 5-year contract to say, well, you know, we gave out a 5-year contract or 3-year contract with some renewal years on them to, I'll call it a dirtier fuel, because we didn't have this study or that study or the perfect information. My guess, if we look globally, there will be a lot of studies that will give our staff confidence to do what they want to do. Certainly the U of T study is very important foundation as part of that decision-making process. We'll have to see if it can be facilitated or speeded up or given preliminary findings. But I think myself, probably like every member of this committee, wouldn't want to miss an opportunity to do something really good for the people of Toronto and the greater community that we all share and the planet that we share, because we don't have perfect information. I think we probably have very good information. We had a deputation telling us, you know, there's a great consensus out here that this is the way to go. So I will certainly be happy to work with any colleagues on this committee to look at this, part of our larger green fleet plan and our TTC plan. We just, again, purchased 400 new hybrid diesel buses. And the hybrid diesel has a dramatic reduction in CO2 emissions and particulate matter. If we can make those buses even cleaner by the TTC adopting a better standard, then certainly we should do that. And I have a TTC meeting this afternoon. Don't know if I'll have a motion ready by then, but I can certainly initiate that conversation with staff to say all of our fleets should be looking at this, because this is an opportunity that none of us should miss. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor de Bearmaker. We want to make you an honorary member of our committee. Councillor Matlow.
We do have a motion to reflect exactly what was just said by staff a moment ago. And when we were discussing the formation of the motion, certainly we considered the timing of the next tender. We considered the timing of the U of T report. And albeit that staff have decided that this report is going to inform their recommendations, there is a lot of information, as Councillor de Bearmaker just mentioned, that we are all relying on to make an informed decision. We've all been around this place long enough, even if you, especially Maria, and for good reason.
Yes.
To know that when our committees and council get behind even an aspirational goal, it can start that movement forward to manifestation. So I think it's incredibly important that this committee get behind the spirit of what we want to do, which is to have a more environmentally friendly fleet, but also without dismissing genuine concerns the staff might raise with respect to costs, etc., and then reviewing that with them and working on that with them. So by saying, come back to us next month, we're saying, bring us everything you've got. Help us provide you with the guidance that we want to provide to, A, see if we can get into the next tender, and if not, at least keep this moving in the right direction. If you provide us information that takes us elsewhere, we'll listen to that too, and we'll make a decision as a committee. But we want to keep this moving. So we're going to be asking them to come back next month. If we need to defer it, we will defer it another month if we need to then. But at least let's get this on the road. No pun intended. So thank you very much.
Pun always intended in this committee. Thank you, Councillor Matlow. Anyone else to speak? Councillor Layton.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Chair, this is not new. Like, this is not a new thing. This is not Toronto out on the cutting edge, not us like really pushing the envelope very far. If we were to switch all our vehicles next year to hydrogen or electric, that would be a big new deal.
Hyperloop.
This really isn't. And so it's just a surprise that there's a little reluctance. I wasn't aware of some of the other municipalities doing this in such close proximity. I'm now kind of surprised that we're even bothering to spend $150,000 on a study with U of T, given we have like great examples of this. And if the state of Minnesota, and I'm just calling up stuff, there doesn't seem to even be much objection to going from 10 to 20%. It's actually their Department of Agriculture that are promoting this. It seems to be a real thing in the Socialist Republic of Minnesota that like it doesn't really have a lot of pushback. Then you look at like York Region, who have the same climatic conditions that we have, probably half of the same fleet, and yet we're going to spend all this money on this study, which I think is good. Like I think our partnership with U of T is a good thing, and backing up our decisions is fine. But to put it off 2 years, which it sounds like would happen unless we said no, let's run these two processes in parallel and get an RFP out the door just to test the market on what the cost might be. It's surprising me now that there seems to be so many other jurisdictions that are already at this point. And if we did have the ability to adjust to climatic conditions with how much biofuel would be contained in winter months and summer months, that would be something we can easily change if we wanted to increase from 10 to 20 to 25 and increase that percentage to drive down our GHG emissions in the years that we lead up to this giant fundamental change in our fleet that will eventually happen for a number of different reasons. So it's not new ground. We shouldn't be nervous about something like this. It will take work, and I respect that this is a big tender, but that work will have in the next 2 years could have enormous impacts on our GHGs in the future without changing any of our equipment that will need to be invested in when we go out and do the next next generation of whatever fuel we use to power our fleet. So what I would hope is that with this report comes back, that we go immediately to City Council. I've confirmed that with the chief purchasing official, that we don't have to delay after that. We can keep moving it forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Doucette.
I will be quick. I had never known there was so much information on biodiesel fuel. And yeah, the yellow grease really perked my interest. But the reason it perked my interest, I'd actually heard about it before. So city councillors at your environment day, if you have a guy named Ian who comes and does your paper shredding, that's how he fuels his vehicle. And you wonder, you can always, well, I shouldn't say you can always smell him coming, but when he said he does this with yellow grease, I didn't understand it. But now I do understand it. And also the fact, just something I've learned today, is if we could get all of our restaurants to, I don't know, sell their grease to someone, it means it's not having to go somewhere else. I mean, I don't know what they do with this stuff. I know that we are always telling them when we do street festivals, don't pour it down our drains. And it makes jobs. Green jobs with yellow grease. There's a catchphrase there somewhere, isn't there? So I support this. I also agree with the other two councillors who've spoken. This isn't brand new. This has been coming round and around. And yeah, we need to do our due diligence, appreciate that. But just go a little bit north of Steeles and we could talk to people who've been doing this. Let's work with everyone. Let's do this better. Let's, make our Transform TO what it's going to be doing and help with, bringing everything together. But I like that yellow grease. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Doucette. Anyone else to speak? I'll just speak and just say that, I think that everyone can hear and feel that there's a very strong desire to move this forward, to accelerate it, and to look at, an RFP for 2019 that involves a heck of a lot more biodiesel content in our fleet. And so, it aligns with Transform TO. I think I'm optimistic the numbers will be good. And I think U of T, if they know that we are, and hopefully someone will update them that this is the strong desire of the Parks and Environment Committee, and it's coming back, and maybe they will come and depute next month. But maybe they will be keen on accelerating their work plan, their analysis. And I think we really need to think about, we always kind of forget about this, but the price of inaction. So all systems go. Looking forward to the report in February. Thank you. So all in favor of the motion? Okay. And the item as amended? Fantastic. Opposed, if any, no one. That carries. Thank you very much. That was great. All right, a little or big item. Thank you to our patient, bird-friendly deputants for our last item, which is PE 24.5, reinforcing the importance of the Toronto Island habitat. And so we have 3 people to depute, and our first one is Ann Purvis. Come on down. Anne, have you been here before? I have. Sorry, you have not? Well, welcome. And your time is there, okay. Which I will clear. And you have 5 minutes, and then we may or may not ask you questions. And it would be lovely to hear from you.
Great. So I'm requesting today that the Parks and Environment Committee support the motion put forward by Councillor Cressy to make the Toronto Islands a bird sanctuary under the Migratory Birds Act. I'm presenting this deputation on behalf of the Toronto Field Naturalist, whose mandate since its inception in 1923 has been the protection and appreciation of nature in Toronto. For just shy of 100 years, the TFN has defended nature on the Toronto Islands by organizing many island hikes annually, keeping species inventories, giving government feedback on development proposals for the islands, and monitoring environmentally significant areas on the islands. Some TFN members resident on the islands are active in these endeavors as we speak. Many famous naturalists were encouraged in their early years by the TFN's Junior Naturalist Club, including Robert Bateman, who says this about the Toronto Islands. In my childhood birding days, the saw-whet owls would sometimes gather on the islands in Toronto's harbour, one of my favorite birding haunts. My friends and I would take the ferry to that bird haven on autumn weekends and spot the saw-whet owls in the dense undergrowth at the island's edge, their lemon yellow eyes staring right back at us through a patch of wild grapes or dogwood. The TFN is asking the Parks and Environment Committee to secure the future of the Toronto Islands as a stopover site for migratory birds and the habitat they require. This can be done by supporting the motion before us here, MM 34.13. The TFN launched a petition in early December about this issue, which more than 2,500 people have signed. Dr. Bridget Stutchbury, author of Science of the Songbirds and an ornithologist from York University, has studied the songbird migration in great detail. She is among the signatories. Here's why this petition has attracted support. The Toronto shoreline is a stopover site for almost 300 species of migratory songbirds, shorebirds, marsh and waterbirds in spring, fall, and winter. The shoreline available for use by these visiting birds is limited, and the Toronto Islands form a large part of it. In spring, our migratory birds have made an amazing flight from as far away as Central America and Brazil, anywhere from 4,000 to 7,000 kilometers. They fly at night to avoid predation, and having crossed Lake Ontario will land on the Toronto shore for refueling. The journey to their nesting grounds in the northern mixed forest of cottage country or the boreal forest will continue when they have fattened up and the weather's right for the journey. In winter, Toronto also experiences an influx of Arctic nesting ducks who have come south from the boreal and the tundra seeking open water. This three-season migration phenomenon is a jewel in the crown of Toronto's natural heritage. Our best efforts must go into protecting and defending it. Some of the birds that stop down on the Toronto Islands are in steep decline. This is according to a Bird Studies Canada report from 2012, the State of Canada's Birds. These would include such aerial insectivores as bank swallows, bobolink and eastern meadowlark, songbirds like the Canada warbler and the wood thrush, marsh birds like the American bittern, and waterfowl like the common goldeneye. These declines are due to many causes, such as loss of both summer and winter habitat in Canada and in the south. Toronto can, however, increase the survival rate of these species by protecting critical stopover habitat at a crucial time in their arduous journey. Our hope is that the bird sanctuary designation will encourage restoration of degraded areas on the Toronto Islands, such as the Wildlife Sanctuary and the Trap. This is from Norm Muir's book, Toronto Island Birding and Site Guide, to improve them as stopover habitat. It ought also to ensure stricter enforcement of already existing regulation of human activity in natural areas. We see this designation as adding a layer of protection to the Toronto Islands against future developments that would be a threat to bird habitat. If Toronto develops the Toronto Islands, probably in combination with the Leslie Street Spit, as a birding destination, it will attract birders from around the world, as is the case at Point Pelee National Park. Point Pelee is a migration stopover in southwestern Ontario on the north shore of Lake Erie, which experienced 333,000 visitors last year. Make the Toronto Islands a bird sanctuary for the protection of migratory birds, migrating birds, and the habitat they require. In so doing, you will be making Toronto a leader in protecting nature in an intensely urban setting.
Thank you very much. Anne, any questions? Councillor Cressy has a question for you.
Just one, thank you for being here, and the message is loud and clear in terms of what you're asking for. The petitions you mentioned, yes. Could you make sure that my office receives those in the event that this committee brings this to council? Those should be presented to council. So would you be able to make sure that I receive those?
Absolutely, okay. Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Anne, for all your work, specifically, but also the work of the Toronto Field Naturalists. You're kind of our unsung heroes, and you're never really in the limelight, but we really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Coming up is Ozma Malik.
Thank you.
Ozma, have you been here before?
I have deputed at a committee before, not this one, I don't think.
Wow, you're going to really enjoy this one.
I have so far. It's been very enjoyable. No more Mike jokes, though, right? Let's rip that up order. All right, ready?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you so much to the members of the Parks and Environment Committee for the opportunity to speak. My name is Asma Malik, and I'm the Toronto District School Board Trustee for TDSB Ward 10. It's Trinity Spadina, which covers City Wards 19 and 20. The Toronto we know and love began on the waterfront, and as this meeting started and we acknowledged, our waterfront is situated on the traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabeg Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. And over the years, waves of industrialization like the ports and the Gardiner have threatened our connection to the waterfront. But committed community groups, local residents, and Torontonians from every part of the city have been and are currently working to reclaim and renew our waterfront and champion its revitalization. With tens of thousands of our neighbors now living within a 10-minute walk of the waterfront, it is not a destination. It's something, as we like to say, is their backyard. And the waterfront is a popular place for countless visitors to our city. No one would be surprised to hear that 17 million people visit the central waterfront annually. Inviting green spaces, arts and culture hubs, the revitalization of the Queen's Quay, including the rejuvenated Martin Goodman Trail, and the diverse and thriving communities collectively make our waterfront our city's front yard, a vibrant destination for Torontonians and visitors alike. I participated in hosting a meeting earlier this week at the Waterfront School and City School about the plans to rejuvenate the school playground alongside the critical neighborhood improvements coming as part of the Bathurst Key Neighborhood Plan. The discussion at the meeting was about the needs of school, families, and community, how everyone can be welcome and benefit from our shared community resources, and that is a really important characteristic defining the future of our waterfront. A crucial part of what makes our waterfront so special is the Toronto Islands, as a home, as a beautiful natural space within the city, and as a unique place of learning. At the Toronto District School Board, we are committed to outdoor education and offering students beyond the classroom learning that they just could not experience inside a classroom. The Island Natural Science School is one of the amazing overnight centers that students from my ward and students from across the city have the opportunity to visit. The experience brings learning to life and connects students to the built and natural world around them. Here, programs focus on giving students experiences which allow interaction with and appreciation for nature and the plant and animal habitats on the island. Students look forward to these trips all year. And I've seen students return from these trips with a passion for environmental stewardship, sustainability, and community. And this makes me hopeful that as we work to catch up with essential investments to protect and repair our planet, the next generation in our city will do even more in the future. And for this reason and so many more, our Toronto Island habitats are critical natural and community resources that must be protected now and for years to come. And as City Councillors, you have an opportunity today to take another step towards building a more livable, sustainable city for now and for the future that our students and our next generations are counting on, and that so many people have been working on for years. So I ask you to support the motion requesting the Ministry of the Environment and Natural Resources to consider the Toronto Islands for designation as a bird sanctuary under the Migratory Bird Act and enact the appropriate regulations for the protections arising from such a designation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any questions of our interesting deputy? Nope.
Thank you so much.
Seeing none, you were very succinct and clear, so
I appreciate it.
People don't have any questions. Thank you very much, and thank you for representing the schools and the students. John Wilson, Waterfront for All, come on down. You are no stranger to any committee, so we won't have to give you the drill, but feel free. Feel free to wow us. Thanks.
Well, you know, wowing you, I have just been wowed by my two predecessors in I think I will leave the wonderful oratory to them and just try to deal with some. I have some wonderful oratory, but they've already said it better than I probably would have. So trying to just focus on some facts. I'm John Wilson. I'm with Waterfront for All. We're a growing coalition of waterfront advocacy groups, but I've also been around the idea of greening Toronto for quite some time with the task force to bring back the Dawn, the Lost River Walks, and the Highland Creek Salmon Festival. So, you know, I kind of get around the city a bit, and not only that, I am an avid birder myself. So I also get around Southern Ontario a little bit and take my money to, you know, Prince Edward County or Norfolk County or Point Pelee when I go birding there. And the Toronto waterfront, as I'm sure we know, but the Toronto waterfront is really quite a very spectacular place. And the birds that come here are one of the reasons. I spend a lot of time on the Leslie Street Spit, where there's a bird monitoring station there. I've checked the numbers there. They have monitored between 160 and 180 migratory birds coming through there, and that's not counting. Typically, they don't monitor at that station the waterfowl, the ducks, and so on, as well as the large raptors and things like that that come through. So there, you know, when we hear numbers that go up to 300, I have no problem believing those numbers at the Toronto waterfront. Leslie Street Spit and Toronto Islands, for a bird, are pretty much the same place. The birds fly, and they can see from one place to another, and they go from one place to another. That's well documented because we look at Norm Murr's book about Toronto Islands, the birds that he's observed there, and they are many of the same birds that we see and monitor and band down on the Leslie Street Spit. Leslie Street Spit has already established a designation called an important bird area, which has very strict criteria which are conformed to there. And they are also, as far as the City of Toronto is concerned, an environmentally significant area. But not only, the key point here is that so are Toronto Islands. Toronto Islands have not entirely the whole area, but many key points in the Toronto Islands have already been designated by the Toronto City Council as environmentally significant areas. To me, this suggests that one thing is that we have done much of the sort of groundwork already. We can expect that the same things that we have been observing in Toronto Islands will be those things that are observed by the federal Environment Ministry scientists when they come to evaluate Toronto Islands. There are 4 criteria for being designated as a migratory bird sanctuary under the Federal Migratory Bird Convention Act. And so the question is, do we qualify? I posed that question to a colleague and friend of mine at Bird Studies Canada, who suggested that, and this is right in line with all of our monitoring and so on, that what we see at the Toronto Islands is a migratory stopover location, which is sort of a term of art to say this is where birds coming, as Ann Purvis mentioned before, birds coming from great distances will come flying ashore here or be ready in the fall to sort of launch out to great distances in their migratory trips that may take them as far as South America. And when they arrive, and I can attest to this, they are pooped, and they really need their stopover locations to recharge and get ready for the next stage of their migratory trip, which in the spring will take them up into the boreal forests and cottage country and areas as far away as Hudson Bay and James Bay. They really, they're pooped, they're feeding as fast as they can. It's great for birders because they're really easy to see. They just jump right out on the branches, and because they're really working hard to revive themselves and recharge their body fat and energy. So I think that we have a very strong case to make that we have an important migratory bird spot on Toronto Islands, and that's why I encourage you to support the recommendation of Councillor Joe Cressy. Thank you very much, Councillor, for putting this forward, and I trust that you will see this positively as I do and push it forward to City Council.
Thank you very much, John. And I think you have some questions, maybe. Councillor Layton.
Thank you. And it was actually just one question of clarity, because when you're talking about the numbers about 150 and 300, it's species, right?
It is species.
Okay.
Those are species. There are tens of thousands of birds.
Exactly.
Probably, pardon me?
Yeah, I just wanted, because I didn't hear the word species in there, so maybe it was just me, but I just wanted to make sure this is that significant.
No, it is 180 species were banned or were monitored at the monitoring station over the last 5 years.
And you're right, they don't ban water birds, they don't ban raptors, they can't catch them.
Yeah. They don't ban cormorants.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor Doucette.
I see on this list of 336 species, I honestly didn't know there was 20 different kinds of sparrows. So I learned something. Trumpeter swans. You have trumpeter swans there?
Absolutely. Trumpeter swans, tundra swans, and mute swans.
Mute swans.
I've seen them all at in one photo.
Can you send some trumpeter swans over to Grenadier Pond, please?
I would be surprised if they're not already there.
The mute swans are there.
Only mute swans?
Yes.
Well, sure.
Sorry, silly questions, but yes, this is amazing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Seeing none, all right, we will take this into committee, and prizes for any councillor who can do a bird call in their questions of staff, or any deputants who can do bird calls. So, questions of staff, anyone? Seeing none, questions or speaking? Okay, and so speakers, and we'll go with outside visiting. Tourist councillors first, from the furthest afield, from Scarborough.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Glenn de Berwicker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'll, of course, support the motion, and I want to thank the Councillor Cressy for bringing this forward. Sometimes that island is sort of right in front of us, and sometimes you forget what's right in front of you. It is a spectacular, extraordinary piece of real estate that the city has. I have to mention, of course, that island was created thanks to the sand from the Scarborough Bluffs. So Scarborough's contribution to the downtown core is there right there every day. So I say that we're very happy to donate our sand to create this beautiful facility for all of Toronto to use. So saying that. The spit itself actually mostly comes from the downtown foundations that were built in all the office towers, but it is extraordinary what we have down there. We have the largest colony of cormorants in the 5 Great Lakes. The TRCA, as Councillor Ajameri was saying to me, it was one of our biggest, I'll say most controversial issues at the time. What do you do with the cormorants? There are many of us who advocated to say, leave them alone. They're not pests. They're not a danger to people. And they kill trees because that's what they're supposed to do. Just like beavers. Beavers cut down trees, but we don't exterminate beavers because beavers have a very important role in the ecosystem. Cormorants likewise have a very important role in the ecosystem. They've been there. We have actually adopted, I'll call it a passive and enlightened management technique, where in the areas closer to the yacht club, where we don't want the cormorants to go onto the next peninsula, all we do is we have a simple technique where our TRCA staff walk in that area. The birds are so sensitive that when people like us walk through an area, they leave. We don't even have to speak. In fact, we have a very specific protocol on how to protect the birds in that area. So this is a wonderful motion. I think we will be thanked for it by all the people in the City of Toronto, plus all the people from around the world who I think will come here. Some do now, but I think to highlight this area in this way will encourage people from every corner of this planet to come and see what we have here, because what we have right in front, right on our doorstep is truly spectacular. So I just again want to thank the councillor for doing that, and I'll bring an extra bucket of sand to the council meeting just to make my own personal contribution.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor de Berwicker. We love you and your props. Especially that, what was the one that was floating? The shark, oh yeah. Okay, Councillor Wong Tam, followed by Councillor Troisi. And Councillor Cressy, I think.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. And I want to also echo my thanks to Councillor Cressy and Councillor Fletcher for bringing the motion forward. It's very interesting because I think that we all have some sort of idea and connection to the island, and probably can remember our first foray into the islands. Mine was as a school child on a school trip, and I had not seen that type of natural beauty in Toronto. I came to Canada in 1975, and everything I saw of the city was just gray. Concrete, blue, gray skies, and everything was drab. And it was actually a school trip to the island, to the school there, where I actually got to see the natural beauty of Toronto, because you actually don't get to see that very often. And because my parents were very working class, I didn't even know what a cottage was until much later in high school, when my friends kept talking about their cottages. But I actually thought I stumbled onto Toronto's cottage, something that we should all take tremendous pride in preserving and making sure we enhance the natural environment. But I have a story that I want to share, is that as a small little short child, going to the island for the very first time, it was this big rambunctious jungle to me as I saw it. And I wandered into the maze. And I was not very tall. Of course, we're all little short people. And I got lost as it got dark. So dust started to hit, and the bugs were coming out, and I was just scared out of my mind, not knowing how to get out of the maze. So eventually, I got out of the maze, and of course, I survived my experience. But I learned to love being able to find those type of adventures, and they weren't always so scary subsequently visits afterwards. But it was literally the sort of cottage for the city. And then exploring Hanlan's Beach as an adult. I don't go there as often as I do now as an elected official, and when I do go, I keep my clothes on, as I once did not, because it is, of course, Toronto's nude beach. All that being said is that there are so many extraordinary natural adventures to be found, and then learning later on about the natural environment and how it completely connects to the urban environment that we live in, and then always recognize the urban encroachment to our natural spaces and what happens when, unintended consequences take place when we introduce a particular use, or we don't have the foresight to see how we can protect that space even better than we have. And then knowing that the Great Lakes are under so much duress, knowing that this is the biggest, most extraordinary natural asset that we have in the city, and knowing that if we have a chance to do more and not do it would be an absolute shame. So this is actually one of the reasons why I've come to the committee today, is that I just wanted to impress upon that it's these actions taken today that actually lead to future enhancements and the preservations of tomorrow. Because as we start to look towards reconciliation and start to listen more and more to Indigenous people, not just with our ears and our hearts, one of the things that they will remind us on is that we're not actually doing what we do for today, but for 7 generations out. And that's what I see as being so important with this motion. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wong-Tam. Councillor Troisi.
Thank you. I'm not sure if people knew this, but bird watching is the #1 recreational leisure activity.
Not pickleball.
It's universal, so it's, my neighbors down the street go to the island every day, and from Cabbagetown just for the bird watching. So it's, so I think he'd be happy that I'm speaking about this. So I do support the request to the federal government to study the designation of Toronto Islands as a bird sanctuary. We all know the islands are one of the Toronto's most popular destinations, and we have the responsibility to protect those elements that make it its jewel that it is today. I believe the city, with community stakeholders, is undertaking a new island master plan to update the vision for the island as a year-round destination that fully expands its opportunities for recreation as a heritage landscape and as a natural habitat. So we'll be studying what infrastructure that is needed to fulfill the plan and make the islands as accessible as possible. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you very much, Councillor Troisi. Home to the islands. And Councillor Cressy.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. And let me begin by thanking our deputants who are here, Waterfront for All, and remind me of the organization. The field naturalists, our local school trustee, Asma Malik, and the thousands who have emailed my office and others about this. I want to acknowledge as well that when I began working on this issue, I began working on it with former Deputy Mayor Pam McConnell. And so the only reason that this was seconded by Councillor Fletcher and not former Deputy Mayor McConnell or current Councillor Troisi is because it took place during that in-between period. And so I want to recognize our former Deputy Mayor, Pam McConnell, for her work on this, as well as the ongoing support, which I know all island residents and birds are grateful for, from Councillor Troisi and the Chair, who I understand is supporting this, Councillor McMahon. Listen, let me just say why we're doing this and what it is. Why we're doing this is we're talking about a bird sanctuary. Toronto Islands are a sanctuary for many. They're a sanctuary for as Councillor Wong-Tam mentioned, people who live in the city and are looking for their cottage. They're a sanctuary for visitors to Toronto who go in droves to see our fabulous islands, and they are also indeed a sanctuary for Toronto and Canada's wildlife and bird population. Many migratory birds use Toronto Islands to both rest and nest. I promised myself I would get that rhyme in, but they do. You know, hummingbirds and songbirds and birds of prey, they use Toronto Islands. And in a growing city, with increasing impediments rising above and into the sky, having a place like Toronto Islands as a sanctuary becomes increasingly important. And so this is about the future, not just today. So what is it? What is a bird sanctuary? Simply, a migratory bird sanctuary can be bestowed by the federal government, by the Federal Ministry of the Environment. There are 90 of these in Canada. There are 9 of them in Ontario. This would be the first in Toronto. What a bird sanctuary means, what the regulatory framework actually does, can range. That's what the federal government drills down and looks into. It can go from protecting nests to looking at issues of noise and disturbance. It varies. There is no cookie-cutter approach to this, and that's important to understand every unique context, like this one. It's a busy area. This isn't a new idea. Indeed, people have been talking about a bird sanctuary on the island for years. Recognizing the environmental significance of the islands is also not a new idea. In fact, the federal government, through the Ministry of Environment, has already recognized Muggs Island, Hanlan's Beach, Centre Island as places of significance. And so this is, as you've heard, a request to the federal government to consider the designation. I've spoken with the local MP, former councillor and current MP Adam Vaughan, who is supportive of this initiative and has asked the city to take this forward. I think it would be a wise move for today and for the future, and I hope you'll consider supporting it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thanks for those factoids about the other bird sanctuaries across Canada and in Ontario. Anyone else to speak on this? Councillor Doucette.
Just very quickly, I didn't actually get to visit the islands until I was about 18. That was my first year here in Toronto, and I was working at the north part of a city, and going to the island reminded me of home. I come from the Isle of Wight, open space, green space, more cows and sheep than people. Couldn't find those on the island, but they did have Far Enough Farm, which also we as councillors who were sitting at that point in time back in 2012, 2013, we, with the last councillor, protected Far Enough Farm because it's important for people to be able to touch animals, see animals, learn about them. I've also, obviously, over the years, taken my children to the island. It's beautiful. But to me, one of the important things about this bird sanctuary is the connection to High Park. Yes, I don't know if we have 20 kinds of sparrows there, but we definitely have the bald eagles. And we also have the other amazing birds, and hopefully the trumpeter swans soon. But I'm sure that if these birds aren't protected on the island, it would affect the birds which come through High Park. We're all connected. And the birds need safe places to come as they are migrating, or hopefully the bald eagles, as we'd like them to stick around a bit longer. So I support this. I think it's a great idea. And this is the first in Toronto. I think is shocking. But as I say, we're allowing the birds to come. And for some reason, they seem to know when they're safe. I know in England we have sanctuaries. We have one where it's a swan, they get thousands of swans coming through, migrating, and I went to visit this up in the sort of east, just north of London, basically. And you go there, and there's thousands. And the swans aren't even just in the sanctuary, they're in the farmers' fields, which I know the farmers weren't so happy about. But by providing these safe places, the birds do seem to realize they are safe, and by having these different ones across the city, I think is a great idea. So you got my full support on this, and we've got to keep the island as the island, because many people use it for different reasons. Thank you.
Councillor Layton, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Doucette. Councillor Layton.
Thank you very much. Just very quickly, I'm in support of the motion coming forward. I also have flagged it for Councillor Fletcher that if this designation is a stronger my partner and I met over the topic of migratory patterns of birds, first with respect to wind energy development, and then she took on a position as the coordinator for the Tommy Thompson Park Bird Banding Station. So I, for the first time, was waking up at 5 in the morning and getting dragged down to the spit to go and count birds and learn what the 50 different kinds of sparrows' names were. I still don't, and I can't distinguish a Canada warbler from a black and white warbler, but they're pretty close. So, like, like those two particular warblers are close. But in a world where they are losing both their summer habitat up in the boreal with logging and the development of the Ring of Fire and northern development. They're losing their habitat in the winter where they go and grow and then come back and mate. They're losing both of those sides. They lost the middle section for a long time. We're only starting to rebuild the canopy to have policies that support gardening that is bird friendly rather than just grass, which is not. We're starting to fill that bit out in the middle, so when birds are flying hundreds of thousands of miles to get from where they winter to where they summer, we need to give that little bit of support. I would add one really cool thing, if you ever think of it. During bird migratory season, the actual, you can see the birds migrating on Doppler radar. It'll actually look at night. They migrate at night. They don't migrate during the day. But, because in the day they're running around getting food to do the next leg. But if you watch the Doppler radar, like the Weather Channel radar, at night during those heavy days of migration, it looks like it's raining in the city of Toronto. Yeah. But it's not, it's birds. It's really cool. Like, it's really neat to watch. And not that you sit there watching all the time, but it's cool to see. And to know that there are millions of birds at night just zooming over our heads, and their first stop after the lake is Toronto. It's our backyards, it's our parks, but there's a couple locations that are particularly important, including the island and the Spit and High Park, I suspect. So doing whatever we can to ensure the long-term protection of them. I was a little concerned about a letter that was written by our friends, those that fish in our city, and I've got some confirmation from staff that the signs that we have up that say environmentally sensitive areas aren't where you should be boating, aren't something that would immediately go up all over the island. This is something of a nuanced approach to what space is protected from what activities. So I'm a little concerned that they have written such a strong letter against, and I hope that we can clarify that with them, that this won't immediately say no paddling. They say it would be in contradiction to a policy that myself and Councillor Cressy passed around making a paddle-friendly city. I certainly think that these are things that exist in parallel and not ones that conflict with one another. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Layton. Great, thank you very much. All right, anyone else to speak? So I'll just say a couple words, and that is just, first of all, to thank our deputants. That was really informative, and maybe we'll get more interactive deputations next time with training us on bird calls and a sparrow quiz, I guess. But I'd like to thank Councillor Garcia for bringing this forward. It's fantastic, and I would also like to thank our superb park staff for all the work they do right across the city, but especially with our island, which really is a treasure. How many world-class cities, any city, have such a unique space, sanctuary in the city, as we do with Toronto Island, and I think we all love it and appreciate it. You can feel that here today. But our superb park staff are working on the management plan for the Toronto Island. They're working on the ferry replacement program. They did phenomenal work on bringing back our islands to us last August with the high lake levels, and they are continuing to do that, and we'll get funding in the budget to do that, and we really appreciate them. Shout out to them. How about a round of applause to them? take the rest of the day off. But with that, I'm wholly supportive of Councillor Cressy's motion. We're just tweaking it a bit to make sure it's the correct level of government in there. The feds, the new title. So that's just what it is. It's just the title throwing in federal department. So with that, all in favor?
Ministry.
Is there, sorry, is there?
Ministry? Yeah. Ministry.
Is it a mystery?
It's a ministry.
Is a mystery. Okay, well, that's maybe another pun within this committee of puns and lame jokes and rhymes. All in favor?
Jokes.
Opposed? That carries. With that, item as amended, all in favor? Opposed? That carries. And motion to adjourn and go back to your regular boring day and leave this wonderful committee. All right? All in favor? Thanks. Thank you.